My family publicly ditched my wedding to party in Cabo and treated me like a disposable asset. They never expected the unimportant son they humiliated would be the one holding everything together when it all fell apart. I'm 35, male, about to marry the woman of my dreams, and I'm standing in this little dressing room at our venue, this rustic lodge on the coast that Darcy fell in love with. I'm fumbling with my cufflinks like an idiot because my hands won't stop shaking when my phone buzzes. Text from Mom, "We're not coming to your stupid wedding. Best of luck. No explanation." Just pure calculated cruelty delivered like a goddamn business memo on my wedding day. I stared at that screen thinking I'd had a stroke or something. Nope. That was really it. That was my send-off from the people who raised me while I was about to marry the only person who'd ever actually given a damn about me. My best man, Reed, knocked on the door, took one look at my face and immediately knew something was screwed. I showed him the text. "Well, that's screwed," he said. "Want me to slash their tires when they don't show up, or should we wait and see how creative we can get? That's Reed for you." He never offers empty words or hugs, just immediate solutions involving potential felonies. We'd been friends since college, where he'd helped me through organic chemistry by bringing drinks and telling me my family was toxic long before I was ready to hear it. Here's the backstory that explains this nuclear-level betrayal. When we got engaged, they called Darcy beneath our standards. This from people whose biggest accomplishment is organizing charity galas where they basically pay to be photographed with other rich people's wives. They said she was a distraction from my potential, like I was some kind of investment portfolio instead of their son. My brother Corey, 32, male, spent Christmas dinner explaining how Darcy was obviously just after the family money. This genius observation came from a 32-year-old who lives in the pool house and whose only job is social media consulting for Dad's distribution company. Professional networking, he calls it. I call it expensive happy hour with a LinkedIn account. They didn't like that her family wasn't loaded. Her dad drives trucks. Her mom manages a retail store. And they live in a town where the biggest excitement is high school football. Meanwhile, my family acts like they invented commerce because Dad built regional distribution solutions into the biggest logistics company between Dallas and Phoenix. But I thought, stupidly apparently, that when it came down to it they'd show up. That blood meant something. They didn't. I kept checking the entrance as the ceremony started. Those front row seats I'd reserved and paid for were empty as a foreclosed house. Not even Corey showed up. The same Corey who literally borrowed money from me last month to cover his car lease. The photographer kept asking if we should wait for my family. Darcy squeezed my hand and whispered, "Screw them. We don't need them." That's when I knew I'd married the right woman. Darcy's side was packed. Her uncle drove from Oklahoma. Her high school friends took time off work. Her mom's Kio workers from the store all showed up in their best dresses, crying during the vows like they'd known me for years. Real people who understood what showing up actually meant. Reed walked her down the aisle since her dad had died 2 years earlier. When he handed her over, he whispered, "If you screw this up, I'll kill you myself. She's too good for you." We got through the ceremony without me having a breakdown. The reception was perfect. Her family danced until their feet hurt. Our college friends got drunk and told embarrassing stories. And nobody asked about my missing relatives. Darcy's mom made a speech about gaining a son instead of losing a daughter. Her uncle taught me how to two-step. These people barely knew me, but they welcomed me like I'd been family for years. Meanwhile, my actual family was posting vacation photos from a beach 2,000 miles away. If only they knew what I was already planning. Later that night, I stepped outside to grab some air when I saw it. My cousin Jake had posted a picture that hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. There they all were. Every single one of them, standing on some private beach in Cabo, looking like a goddamn travel magazine spread. Mom in a designer sundress. Dad in an obnoxious Hawaiian shirt. Corey with drinks in both hands wearing sunglasses that cost more than most people's car payments. They're all tan and glowing, arms around each other, glasses raised to the camera like they're celebrating something. The caption, "Finally together. Family first. Blessed. Finally together on my wedding day." While I was saying vows to the woman I love, they were literally toasting their decision to abandon me on a beach 1,800 miles away. This wasn't just skipping my wedding. This was a coordinated screw you. They planned this trip, booked the flights, arranged the resort, probably laughed about it while planning, then posted it during my ceremony like they wanted me to see it. The timestamp on Jake's post was 4:47 p.m., exactly when Darcy and I were having our first dance. Reed found me outside looking murderous. I showed him the photo. After studying it, he declared it impressively shitty even for them. Then asked about our plan. "So, what's the play?" he said. "We can start with sugar and gas tanks and work our way up to industrial sabotage." "Something like that," I told him. "Cool. I'll clear my schedule." Reed understood revenge the way some people understand wine, with patience, precision, and an appreciation for the finer details. He'd majored in computer science before switching to finance. So, he knew exactly how vulnerable modern businesses were when their IT guy suddenly wasn't their IT guy anymore. The thing is, I'd been running regional distribution solutions for 8 years. I built the inventory management system from scratch after Dad bought some piece of software that couldn't track a package across the street. I negotiated every major contract, designed the route optimization algorithms, and personally trained half the warehouse staff. When clients had problems, they called me directly. Not the company line, not Dad's office, but my personal cell phone. Dad took credit during board meetings and industry conferences. Corey got the fancy title, but I was the guy who made sure 20 trucks got loaded correctly every morning and arrived where they were supposed to go. The following Monday, I showed up to work like any other day, smiled at the receptionist, grabbed my coffee, walked into my office where my name was still on the door, and all my access codes still worked. Regional Distribution Solutions handles supply chain logistics for everything from electronics to automotive parts across 3 states. We're talking about a $10 million operation with 85 employees and contracts with major retailers. Dad started it 20 years ago, but I turned it into what it is today. The beauty of building something yourself is knowing exactly how to break it. Every security protocol, every backup system, every fail-safe, I designed them all. More importantly, I designed them to require my personal authorization for critical functions. Not because I was paranoid, but because Dad and Corey had a history of making expensive mistakes when left unsupervised. I spent that Monday morning documenting everything, every client contact, every vendor relationship, every operational procedure I'd personally developed. Then I started the paperwork to extract myself completely from their corporate structure. By noon, I'd filed paperwork removing myself from the corporate entity. By 2 p.m., I'd frozen every corporate expense account, credit line, and operational fund they had access to. I made sure it would hit them midweek, right as they were probably ordering their 4th round of room service in paradise. The group chat exploded around 6 p.m. Dad texted first, then Corey, then the calls started. I ignored every single one. Just sat on my couch with my wife, eating leftover wedding cake and watching Netflix. Finally, I sent one message to the group chat. "Cabo looks nice. Enjoy the ride home." Then I turned off my phone and opened the expensive wine Reed had given us as a wedding gift. "Everything okay?" Darcy asked. "Perfect," I said. And for the first time in years, I meant it. A week of absolute radio silence was all it took for them to completely lose their minds. I didn't pick up a single call or respond to increasingly frantic voicemails, not even when Corey texted a long rambling message about how I was destroying the family legacy over hurt feelings. Hurt feelings, like they'd forgotten to invite me to a barbecue instead of orchestrating public humiliation on my wedding day. Reed came by with drinks and updates. The freeze was complete. They couldn't access operational funds, approve shipments, or even order office supplies without my authorization, and they were still in Cabo until Sunday. He called it beautiful, brutal poetry. "Your brother tried calling me," Reed reported. "Wanted to know if I had your emergency contact information. I told him you were on your honeymoon and unreachable." "Honeymoon?" "Yeah. Figured that would drive the point home about what they missed." Meanwhile, Darcy was settling into married life perfectly. She landed a freelance contract with a tech startup, started redecorating our apartment, filled our space with an energy I didn't realize I'd been missing. She knew something was up with my family, but was smart enough not to push. She'd make coffee in the morning and ask if I was okay. I'd tell her I was handling some business issues with the family company, and she'd nod and change the subject to something actually important, like whether we wanted hardwood floors or if the kitchen needed new cabinets. Then came the 6:50 a.m. door pounding on Tuesday. Dad stood there in his usual overpriced business attire, still sporting that Cabo tan like a neon sign advertising his betrayal. Behind him, Corey in yesterday's clothes and a 3-day hangover. His designer polo was wrinkled, and he looked like he'd been sleeping in airport chairs. They didn't ask to come in. Dad launched straight into screaming about how I'd sabotaged the company, abandoned my responsibilities, and how the freeze was costing them thousands daily. Corey chimed in with his brilliant analysis. Dude, what the hell? You can't just shut everything down because you're mad we went on vacation. Vacation? That's what he called it. I stood there sipping my coffee, letting them rant. When they ran out of steam, I asked, "How was the beach?" Dad's face went purple. "This isn't about that. This is about the business." I agreed completely. It was about the business they'd built on my work while treating me like an employee instead of a partner. The business that apparently ran so smoothly they could abandon it for a week-long beach party scheduled specifically to conflict with my wedding. "You built this company from nothing," Dad reminded me, trying to pull the authority card. "You owe me everything. Everything you know about business, I taught you." Actually, what Dad taught me was how not to run a business. I'd learned logistics from textbooks, industry publications, and trial and error. Dad's contributions were mostly golf meetings where he promised things I'd have to figure out how to deliver. I pointed out he just proved he couldn't run it without me. The company he'd supposedly built was hemorrhaging money after 1 week of him actually trying to manage it. So, here's how it worked. They wanted controls back. They could buy me out, fair market value, cash up front. Corey panicked about not having that kind of liquidity. I suggested they shouldn't have gone to Cabo. The best part was watching them realize I wasn't bluffing. This wasn't some dramatic gesture or emotional outburst. I'd methodically removed myself from every operational system, and they had no idea how to undo it. Dad started threatening lawyers, and I reminded him discovery would be fascinating, especially the part where they'd have to explain under oath why they'd scheduled a family vacation during their son's wedding. I closed the door in their faces. They pounded and shouted for 15 more minutes. I didn't open it again. That afternoon, I made casual calls to our 3 biggest clients. Just conversations about contract renewals, asking if they'd had any service issues lately. They hadn't yet, but they would. By week 2, Regional Distribution Solutions was hemorrhaging money like a severed artery. My automated systems required daily authorization codes only I knew. Without them, shipments got delayed. Inventory management went haywire, and route optimization defaulted to manual entry. Deliveries that used to take 2 days were taking 5. Our biggest clients started getting computer shipments to Portland when they were supposed to go to Seattle. The auto parts chain received brake pads meant for Spokane. The home improvement store got gardening supplies in January. Customer service complaints rolled in like a tsunami. Corey, in his infinite wisdom, decided he could handle client relations. This is the same guy who once asked me if Alaska was in Canada and whether we needed passports to ship there. He started taking calls from angry customers and somehow making everything worse. The first disaster was with Peterson Electronics, our biggest account. Their regional manager called about delayed shipments, and Corey confidently explained they were optimizing delivery windows for maximum efficiency. When pressed for specifics, Corey mentioned something about strategic timing optimization and next-generation logistics solutions. "I just need to know when my inventory will arrive," the guy said. "Well, it's complicated," Corey replied. "We're revolutionizing the last-mile delivery experience. You deliver to our warehouse. What's last mile about that?" Corey had no idea. The call ended with Peterson Electronics threatening to terminate their contract unless they got answers. Corey forwarded the complaint to Dad with a note about difficult clients with unrealistic expectations. Reed monitored the situation like sports scores, sending me Corey's LinkedIn updates. The kid was posting articles about leadership during crisis, literally describing problems as solutions. He bragged about streamlining delivery windows, code for everything being 3 weeks late, and personalizing customer service, not knowing anyone's name and calling them all buddy. One of his posts actually said they were revolutionizing last-mile delivery through strategic timing optimization. "We're a distribution company that moves pallets of merchandise to retail stores, not DoorDash drivers delivering burritos." The comment section was brutal. Other logistics professionals asking if he understood what business they were in. Then Janet from the electronics retailer called. 3 years of working together, and now she was diplomatically explaining their serious issues. Shipments consistently late, products going to wrong locations. And when she called for updates, she kept getting transferred to my brother who wasn't familiar with account specifics. "He told me our Phoenix distribution center was in New Mexico," she said. "And he kept calling me Jennifer." "That sounds frustrating," I replied, barely containing my laughter. "It is. Look, I've always enjoyed working with you personally. But if things don't improve by month end, we're going to have to explore other logistics partners. I understand completely. You have to do what's best for your business. The irony was perfect. Corey thought he could waltz into another logistics company and charm his way into a management position. But logistics is a small industry, and word travels fast about incompetent family members who can't read shipping manifests or remember which state major cities are in. That Friday, an old colleague at Premier Logistics called. The electronics retailer had reached out asking about backup logistics support. But here's the kicker. Corey had applied for a consulting position there last week, listing himself as Chief Operations Officer and using my name as a reference. Corey was applying for jobs with fake titles while supposedly saving the family company. When I texted him to stop using my name on applications, he replied, "Screw you, I'm trying to save the family business while you throw a tantrum." I forwarded his response to Premier Logistics with a note about his communication skills matching his qualifications. That night, I got an unexpected text from a number I barely recognized. "We need to talk. Evan. Evan, my cousin. Dad's brother's kid. The family black sheep who'd been frozen out of everything since college. Coffee tomorrow?" I texted back. "Yeah, I've got stuff you need to see." By Monday, the auto parts chain suspended their contract pending service improvements. The home improvement store sent formal warnings about delivery failures. Evan looked like he'd been living rough. We met at a diner across town and he got straight to business. "So, they finally screwed you over too," he said, stirring sugar into black coffee. "Something like that. Good. Maybe now you'll listen." He pulled out a folder. "I've been documenting their shit for 2 years. Ever since they cut me out of the succession plan for Corey. Turns out Evan had been quietly working as a freelance analyst doing books for small companies. But he'd also been tracking regional distribution solutions from the outside, watching for his chance to prove they'd made a mistake choosing Corey over him. Back in college, Evan had actually been the smart one. 3.8 GPA in business administration, internships at 2 Fortune 500 companies, accepted to Northwestern's MBA program. But one drunk driving arrest junior year, and suddenly he was the family's screw-up while Corey coasted through community college with a 2.4 GPA and no consequences for anything. "Your dad's been cooking the books," Evan said, sliding papers across the table. "Not criminal, but creative accounting that makes the company look more profitable than it is. Corey doesn't know because he can't read financial statements anyway." The documents were fascinating. Dad had been inflating revenue by counting pending contracts as completed sales, deferring maintenance costs, and using creative depreciation schedules. On paper, Regional Distribution Solutions looked like a $10 million company. In reality, they were leveraged to the teeth with about $400,000 in actual liquid assets. There's more. Evan showed me screenshots of a family group chat I wasn't included in, the Cabo trip planning. Mom suggesting they teach me a lesson about priorities. Corey joking about how I'd probably cry during the ceremony when nobody showed up. Dad saying this would finally prove Darcy was just after money. If she really loved me, one day wouldn't matter. They'd spent weeks planning this humiliation. Mom had suggested the timing specifically to make a point about family loyalty. Corey had joked about me finally learning where I stand. Dad had called it a teaching moment about respecting family hierarchy. The worst part was seeing Dad's message. If he's really committed to that girl, missing one day won't matter. If it does matter, then we know where his priorities are. They turned my wedding into a test I wasn't told I was taking. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because they screwed me over first." Evan's voice was bitter. "I had a 3.8 GPA in business. Did 2 internships, learned the systems from the ground up. But Corey gets handed everything because he's the right kind of family. Then they cut my trust fund when I got arrested. One mistake and I'm persona non grata. The bomb. Dad had been negotiating to sell Regional Distribution Solutions to a private equity firm. The deal was worth $8.2 million with Corey getting a guaranteed management position and Dad retaining 20% ownership. I wasn't mentioned anywhere in the documents. They were planning to cash out and cut me out entirely. The wedding snub wasn't punishment. It was them burning bridges before they didn't need me anymore. The PE firm is supposed to sign next month, Evan said. But it was before you pulled the plug. Now Dad's panicking because he can't show them a functional company. I stared at the papers. My family hadn't just abandoned my wedding. They'd been planning to abandon me completely. The years of taking credit for my work, the condescending treatment, the casual disrespect. It was all leading to this moment when they'd sell everything I'd built and walk away with millions. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to watch them burn," Evan said simply, "and I want you to succeed. You always treated me like family instead of a screw-up." That was true. I defended Evan at family dinners, helped him out after the DUI, recommended him for jobs when nobody else would. While they wrote him off, I saw someone who'd made mistakes but wasn't a lost cause. We spent 3 hours going through documents. Dad's emails to the PE firm promising a smooth transition and family unity. Corey's application to business school under the assumption he'd be managing an $8 million company soon. Mom's calendar showing meetings with wealth management advisors about post-sale asset allocation. They'd planned my entire future without me. Now I was planning theirs without them. One more thing, Evan said as we finished. The PE firm is meeting with Dad this Friday to tour the facility and review operations. If that goes well, they sign the following Monday. Perfect. By Friday, Regional Distribution Solutions would be in complete chaos. The tour would be a disaster, and the deal would collapse. But I had something better in mind. Evan, how would you like to help me steal an $8 million deal from under them? His grin was vicious. Thought you'd never ask. 3 weeks after the wedding, Regional Distribution Solutions was in full crisis mode, but now I had inside intelligence making every move surgical. The electronics retailer terminated their contract. The auto parts chain was routing shipments through Premier Logistics temporarily. The home improvement store demanded a 20% rate reduction to renew. Without those 3 anchor clients, the company was losing approximately $35,000 monthly. Dad hired lawyers. The thick envelope arrived with legal threats, wrapped in corporate language about breach of fiduciary duty, claiming I'd sabotaged operations, stolen proprietary systems, and intentionally damaged client relationships. Complete bullshit, but expensive. My attorney smiled when other lawyers tried intimidating her clients. Sarah had handled Dad's divorce from his first wife 20 years ago, so she knew exactly what kind of man she was dealing with. After reading the first page, she declared them desperate. The lawsuit had no merit, and they knew it. Discovery would force them to prove they could run operations without me. Based on what I'd told her, they couldn't. They're threatening to sue you for leaving with proprietary knowledge, she explained. But the systems you built aren't trade secrets if you built them yourself, and they can't prove sabotage when all you did was quit. But thanks to Evan's intel, I knew something my lawyer didn't. They were planning to sell before any lawsuit could conclude. This was just theater to scare me into cooperating until they could cash out. Evan forwarded me Dad's email to the family lawyer. Keep him tied up in legal proceedings until we close with Harrison Capital. After that, it won't matter what he does. Harrison Capital, the PE firm. They specialized in acquiring logistics companies, streamlining operations and flipping them within 5 years. Dad's retirement plan was selling them my life's work, then playing golf while I got nothing. While their lawyers drafted threats, I made calls. Not sabotage, just business conversations with people who'd worked with me for years. I gave heads up to our software vendor, insurance broker, and lead driver about no longer being with Regional Distribution Solutions. If they needed support, they'd have to go through proper channels. Reed helped me understand the legal implications. His finance background included business law, and he'd seen plenty of family companies tear themselves apart. The key was documenting everything, every email, every system I'd built. Every client relationship I developed independently. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. Janet from the electronics retailer officially terminated their contract but was very interested in discussing terms if I started my own logistics operation. That weekend, I filed incorporation papers for Atlas Distribution Solutions. Reed helped design a website. Darcy suggested the name Atlas Holds Up the World. Seemed appropriate. Darcy had been watching this whole situation unfold with quiet satisfaction. She'd never liked my family, but she'd tried to be supportive before the wedding. Now that they'd shown their true colors, she was fully on board with whatever nuclear option I chose. Good, she said when I told her about the new company. Maybe now we can build something that's actually ours instead of always wondering when they'll stab you in the back again. Darcy understood business better than my family gave her credit for. Her retail management experience included inventory tracking, vendor relations, and customer service, all transferable skills. She offered to handle Atlas Distribution's bookkeeping until we could afford a real accountant. By Monday, I had LLC paperwork, a business license, and 3 potential clients who'd heard through the grapevine. I was available for logistics consulting. Thursday, their accountant Tom called. Good guy, 15 years with him. Always played it straight. He probably shouldn't be calling, but thought I should know the first quarter numbers. It was bad. Without the electronics retailer, and with operational inefficiencies, they were down 60% from last quarter. The warehouse lease was 2 months behind. payroll covered by credit cards, and they'd taken a second mortgage on the family house to cover immediate expenses. They could survive 2 months, maybe 3, if they didn't lose more clients. And Tom didn't know what I already knew from Evan's documents. The second mortgage wasn't just for operational expenses. It was also covering Dad's gambling debts from those client golf trips that included high-stakes poker games. "I shouldn't be telling you this," Tom said, "but they're asking me to falsify reports for the PE firm. I won't do it, but they might find someone who will." That was useful. Harrison Capital would discover the financial misrepresentations during due diligence, but not until after they'd wasted weeks on a deal that would never close. Evan texted me that night. Harrison Capital moved the meeting to tomorrow. "Your dad is in full panic mode." Reed asked about Phase 3. I replied we were entering the endgame, but first I had a PE firm to call. By month 2, Regional Distribution Solutions was in free fall, but I had one more card to play. The home improvement store terminated their contract after lawnmowers ended up in Minnesota in January. The remaining clients were small regional accounts barely covering warehouse rent. Meanwhile, I was building Atlas Distribution Solutions while their empire burned. The electronics retailer officially signed as my first major client. The auto parts chain wanted a pilot program. 3 smaller companies reached out about my innovative approach to supply chain optimization. Innovative approach. I was just doing the job correctly. Starting Atlas Distribution was like rebuilding a car engine I designed from memory. I knew exactly which vendors to call, which software systems worked best, and how to price contracts competitively. Within 6 weeks, I had everything Regional Distribution Solutions took 20 years to build. The difference was efficiency. No Corey posting about synergy while screwing up basic math. No dad taking 3-hour golf meetings with clients who just wanted their shipments to arrive on time. No mom scheduling charity events in the conference room during peak shipping season. Darcy proved invaluable during the startup phase. She handled client communications with a professionalism that made me realize how much Corey's incompetence had been costing us. Friday morning came, the day Dad was supposed to wow Harrison Capital with a facility tour and operational review. Evan sent me real-time updates from a coffee shop across the street. Dad's here early, pacing around like a crackhead. Corey just showed up in an Uber because his car got repossessed. This is going to be beautiful. At exactly 10 a.m., Harrison Capital's team arrived. 2 analysts, 1 senior partner, all business suits and clipboards. "They're inside," Evan texted. "Dad's trying to give them a tour, but half the warehouse is empty because they couldn't afford inventory restocking." 10 minutes later, one of the analysts is taking pictures of dust circles where equipment used to be. Corey tried explaining it as optimizing floor space utilization. The guy looks confused. The beautiful irony. Dad had spent weeks preparing this presentation about a profitable, efficient operation. Instead, Harrison Capital was touring a warehouse that looked like it was going out of business. Because it was. At 11:30, my phone rang. Harrison Capital's senior partner, David Morrison. "Is this the former operations director for Regional Distribution Solutions? This is Atlas Distribution Solutions. How can I help you?" "We just finished touring regional distribution, and frankly, it's not what we expected based on the financial projections." "We understand you recently started your own logistics company." "That's correct. Would you be available for a conversation about acquisition opportunities? We're very interested in your client base and operational expertise." I scheduled a meeting for the following Tuesday. Harrison Capital wanted to buy my 2-month-old company instead of Dad's 20-year empire. Evan texted the aftermath. They left after an hour. Dad tried chasing them to the parking lot. One analyst said something about material misrepresentation and due diligence failures. Corey asked if they were still interested in hiring him. They literally laughed. Harrison Capital had done their homework. They'd researched me after Regional Distribution Solutions' operational failures started making industry news. When they saw the client exodus following me to Atlas Distribution, they realized they'd been looking at the wrong company. The PE firm understood logistics. They knew operational efficiency when they saw it. And they'd spent an hour watching Corey fumble through basic inventory management while Dad made excuses for empty warehouse space. Then they'd called me and discovered I was already doing everything they wanted to buy. Friday brought the expected call from First National Bank about Regional Distribution Solutions account. Several loan payments were past due, and they couldn't reach anyone who understood cash flow projections. They'd spoken with Corey. He wasn't familiar with equipment financing terms. Monday, Mom called for the first time since the wedding. She wanted to talk. This had gone too far. I asked if it had. She claimed I was destroying Dad's life's work over a misunderstanding. The trip was planned months ago. They thought I'd understand that business relationships required. I interrupted. She texted me on my wedding day telling me not to expect anyone to show, then posted vacation photos during my ceremony. That wasn't a misunderstanding. She called me dramatic. I pointed out they were being evicted. After denying it, I laid out the facts. Warehouse lease 2 months behind, equipment financing in default, Dad mortgaging the house to cover payroll, and they'd just lost their last major client. When she asked how I knew all this, I explained I'd built the systems tracking everything. Now Corey was trying to run them without knowing what any numbers meant. "We're family," she insisted. I reminded her they'd made it very clear on my wedding day exactly what kind of family we were. What I didn't mention was that Harrison Capital was offering $3.2 million for Atlas distribution. Not bad for 8 weeks' work. 3 months after my wedding, Regional Distribution Solutions was officially dead. The warehouse got repossessed on Tuesday. Tom called with updates. They were liquidating everything: equipment, inventory, even office furniture. Dad had been sitting in his car in the parking lot for 2 hours just staring at the building. The house was entering foreclosure proceedings. They were $65,000 underwater between the mortgage and business loans. Corey had moved back in after his car got repossessed. And he couldn't find another job because word got around about the resume fraud. But here's the kicker. They'd been asking Tom about my new company. Specifically, they wanted to know if Atlas Distribution might be hiring. They wanted me to give them jobs. Evan had found an apartment across town and was working as my head of financial analysis. Turns out when you give someone a real chance instead of writing them off for past mistakes, they can be incredibly loyal and competent. Dad's been drinking heavily, he reported over coffee. Mom's applying for retail jobs. Corey's doing DoorDash, but keeps getting bad reviews because he can't find addresses. Corey, who'd spent years bragging about disrupting logistics, was now delivering fast food and somehow still screwing it up. That afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. "This is your mother. We need to talk. It's urgent." Another hour later. "Please, we lost everything. We need help." I didn't respond to either. That evening, all three showed up at my apartment. Dad in a polo shirt that had seen better days. Mom without her usual designer jewelry. Corey looking like he'd been sleeping in his car. The contrast was startling. 3 months ago, these people had flown to Cabo for a week-long vacation rather than attend my wedding. Now, they looked like they'd been camping in a Walmart parking lot. Dad launched into a clearly rehearsed speech about coming to apologize. They'd made a terrible mistake with the wedding, learned their lesson, and hoped to rebuild our relationship while discussing business opportunities. Mom stepped forward. "We heard about your new company. We were hoping you might have some positions available. We're willing to start at entry level." Entry level? The audacity was almost impressive. "What kind of positions?" I asked. Corey tried sounding humble. "I have experience in logistics operations. I could handle client relations or maybe social media marketing." "Experience in logistics operations," I repeated. "You mean the company that just collapsed because you couldn't figure out how the computer systems worked?" Dad offered consulting services, business development, maybe mentoring younger employees. He'd built regional distribution solutions from nothing, so he had valuable experience. I pointed out he'd built a company that collapsed the moment I stopped holding it together. Mom tried the family angle. I reminded her families show up to weddings. She explained the trip was planned months in advance, and my wedding was planned a year in advance. They'd had 12 months to choose between a family vacation and their son's wedding. They chose the vacation. "Besides," I added, "I already have all the family help I need. Evan's doing great as my financial analyst." The looks on their faces were priceless. Dad's mouth actually dropped open. Mom looked like I'd slapped her. Corey just stared, probably trying to figure out who Evan was. "Evan," Dad finally managed. "You hired Evan?" "Yeah, I hired Evan." Dad's composure finally cracked. "Fine. They screwed up. They were sorry, but I couldn't destroy their lives over one mistake. I hadn't destroyed their lives. I just stopped building them." Corey made one final desperate plea. They were desperate. Mom crying for weeks. Dad couldn't sleep, and he was basically homeless. Just give them something. Anything. I looked at these 3 people in my doorway. The same people who'd texted me on my wedding day telling me not to expect them to show up. Who'd spent years treating me like an employee while taking credit for my work. who'd planned to sell the company without telling me and cut me out entirely. "Here's what I'm going to give you," I said slowly. "I'm going to give you exactly what you gave me on my wedding day. Nothing." "That's cruel," Mom said. "No, Mom. Cruel is abandoning your son on the most important day of his life for a beach vacation. Cruel is planning to sell his life's work without telling him. Cruel is calling his wife beneath your standards while living off his labor." Evan had shown me the group chat screenshots. Every insult, every joke at my expense, every plan to exclude me. I'd seen it all. Dad tried one last desperate play about business contacts, client relationships, industry connections. Didn't any of that mean anything to me? I explained his industry connections were working with me now. The electronics retailer, auto parts chain, home improvement store. They'd all called me directly after his company collapsed, and Harrison Capital was in talks to acquire Atlas Distribution for $3.2 million. The number hit them like a physical blow. In 8 weeks, I'd built something worth more than their 20-year company's market value. Corey's pride finally broke completely. He begged for just a job. Anything. Warehouse work, answering phones, whatever I needed. I told him he couldn't handle being a warehouse worker. When he asked how I could be so cold to my own family, I explained they'd taught me. Every family dinner where they insulted my wife. Every time they treated me like an inconvenience instead of a brother, they taught me exactly how much family loyalty was worth. Finally, Dad said this wasn't over. Yes, it was. They'd find a way to rebuild, start over. Good luck with that. Just don't use my name as a reference. I closed the door. Reed called 20 minutes later. "Dude, I just saw your family leaving the building. They looked like someone shot their dog. They asked me for jobs," I told him. "No freaking way." "Yep. All 3 of them wanted to work for Atlas Distribution." "What did you tell them?" "To go screw themselves." "Savage. I'm proud of you, man. Last I heard, they're still making payments on that Cabo trip. Hope the beach was worth it."